Well, good morning. I hope you've had a good week so far. And if not, I pray it turns around starting today. I pray that God will bless you and keep you, and He'll make His face to shine upon you. So I'm chosen a verse today out of Psalm chapter 27. So let me just give you a little bit of background. David wrote most of the Psalms, and he wrote this psalm. So David spent, I think it was like 12 years. It was over 10 years. It was over a decade that David spent uh, having Saul chase him through the mountains trying to kill him before he was actually able to take the throne and be the king of Israel and succeed Saul. Uh, whatever, follow Saul. He was actually chosen while Saul was still king. He was chosen to replace King Saul, and that's what the problem was. So when David writes in the Psalms about having enemies chasing him, he literally had enemies chasing him. When he writes in the Psalms about enemies setting traps for him, he literally had enemies setting traps for him. He literally had enemies who were literally seeking to take his life, chasing him through the mountains and laying in wait for him. So when he writes about those things, he literally knows what it's like to have that happen. So that's why a lot of his psalms are like that. And this psalm is no different. But what he's expressing in this psalm is he's expressing that he knows that what he has to do is he has to stay close to God. More specifically, he has to stay inside of God's tent or God's tabernacle. He has to be living with God. He has to be in God's presence. Now, in the ancient Near East, in which David lived, so if you had a guest in your tent, you were responsible for them. You were responsible for their provision, and you were responsible for their protection. And if anything happened to them, if any hardship came upon them while they were a guest and while they were staying in your tent, it was actually to your shame, and it was actually your fault, and you were the one who was actually supposed to correct that and supposed to make it right. And so he's playing on that imagery about how he has to stay in God's tent. And specifically what he's saying in this verse that I'm going to read is he's saying God is responsible to protect me. So this is Psalm 27 and it's verse 5. And he says, "For in the time of trouble, he shall hide me in his pavilion. In the secret place of his tabernacle, he shall hide me." He says, God is going to hide me when trouble comes. God is going to put me in a secret hiding place that he has inside of his tent, his tabernacle. He is going to place me in there whenever trouble comes. He is going to hide me because he is responsible for protecting me when I stay close to him. And then the last verse of that, it says, he shall set me high up on a rock. This is symbolic of victory. He's going to set me high up on a mountain. He's going to lift me up, and he's going to be the strong and stable and secure rock underneath my feet. David could see past his troubles, and he could see the victory that God was going to provide. So David knew that if he lived close to God, if he stayed in God's presence, that God was responsible for giving him the victory. We call this in the New Testament, we might use the phrase, abiding in Christ. David knew he had to abide. He knew he had to live in God's presence, and that when he did, God was responsible for him, for his provision and for his protection. For in the time of trouble, he shall hide me in his pavilion. In the secret place of his tabernacle, he shall hide me. He shall set me high upon a rock. Psalm 27, verse 5. Get out there and faith today. Love you guys. Bye.